start recording and we... Okay, good morning to everyone and welcome to the spin-off Competence Lab. Today we have our almost last sessions, two last sessions. Today and the next session will take place on 6th of July at 11 a.m. Previously, we had already 8 sessions of spin-off Competence Lab, which with different topics, which were intellectual property rights, trademarks protection, business model, speculative design, etc. The main idea of the Competence Lab is to provide the connection, establish this connection between scientific society and business, and to provide trainings for the young researchers how to develop their own businesses. Let's say how to be more creative and to apply all their knowledge in the business. If you haven't watched the previous sessions of spin-off Competence Lab, you can check it out in our YouTube channel, CU channel, and also to the ResearchU webpage. And today we have a very interesting webinar with the name Design Thinking Solving Problems with New Ideas, which will present Leve Freiwald. From the University of Kiel. Leve have education in industrial engineering, specifically in technology and in electronic science, something like this. I think Leve. And also, he has very extended experience, and right now he works like a consultant in startup office at the University of Kiel too. So thank you, Leve, to provide with this interesting webinar and workshops. It will consist on a theoretical part, and also then we will have practical sessions. So thank you to everyone for coming, and enjoy today's session. And I give the floor to Leve, and let's get started. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first part of Design Thinking Workshop, Solving Problems with New Ideas. This is the first workshop, and please make sure, I want to tell you before, that you register for the second part individually, because it's not the same as you registered right now. And firstly, I want to introduce myself and my colleague Katharina Knapp. She is entrepreneurship lecturer at Kiel University for students, PhD candidates, and postdocs of all fields. And she's right now on parental leave, but we both work the workshop out together. I'm Leve Freiwald. I'm, like Maria said, a startup advisor at Center for Entrepreneurship at Kiel University. And I'm also a founder or co-founder of Aerosand. That's a startup, a spin-off of the University of Kiel, dealing with radar measurement devices. We developed some devices, and we are doing services for measurements for industrial customers. So we have a lot to do today, so my introduction is very short. If you want to learn more about me, just add me on LinkedIn, for example. Okay, this workshop and the procedure, and I will give you some information right now. It's not like I will tell you everything and then we are done. It's a real workshop right now we are facing with. So the design thinking process is up to 6 phases. It's like the understand phase, observe, point of view, ideate, prototype, and test. In today's workshop, we will face the first 3 phases, and so we are in the problem space. For the introduction and for every phase of the design thinking process, we have videos to explain you in detail how this works and why is it such a good methodology to work with to solve problems. These short videos, Katharina Knapp is the speaker of the videos. I will show you here, and then I will explain you the working sheets we are facing with. So we are working in group work of 3 persons each, and we are having breakout sessions. So every breakout session has 3 persons in it, and that's very important. The group number, so you have a team of 3, equals the number of your breakout session. The group division takes place automatically. I will do it. So you maybe work with stranger persons, but that's the point, and that's very important for this methodology. And when you are working on a working sheet, I will tell you 1 minute before it ends, the working phase, that it ends in 1 minute. And then you have time to finish your sheet up. And then you automatically enter the main session. And then we talk about the next steps. To work with each other today, we are using Concept Board. And I will show you shortly right now how it looks like and how it works. So I hope you can see everything. This is the concept board we are working on. And here you can see, I hope you see my mouse. Above the group numbers are written down. So the breakout session number is like the group number. And then you have different working sheets. The first one is for each participant itself, but I will tell you in a few minutes about it. And then we start the teamwork. And that is the flow of the workshop today. We are going through these working sheets and working in a team. You have to talk a lot with your team members to get the best ideas. And after that, we are building a persona and generating how might we questions. No problem if you don't have any idea what this means, but I will explain to you and Katharina as well. So that is the first workshop. So we have a lot to do today, and the next workshop will face the next 3 phases, and it's a solution space. All right. Here, the concept board is like very easy. In the upper bar, you have the hand and erase, and you can draw something, you can use shapes, you can directly text into the room, or you can use what I would prefer, sticky notes. So you can add a sticky note in different colors. Maybe you have a color you like most, and then you can just add it and write down. And here you can rearrange the size of the font and something like that. So it's very easy. You can work on it, and you can comment as well, but I think comment is not necessary. You can talk about everything in your group. All right. And no worries, you are not able to rearrange the working sheets for itself. All right. So like I told you, use at best sticky notes to write your ideas down. And like I said before, today are the first 3 phases. Please make sure you're muted in the main session. So we also stream this live on YouTube. So it would be better that not everybody can hear you. And if you have any questions, please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. It's like in the bar. I think maybe you know Zoom, everybody. I think it's the most common video streaming tool or video workshop tool. And here is a question. No, it's good morning. Okay, perfect. So until now, do you have any questions connected to the workshop and the procedure of the workshop? I can't see a hand. There. Yes.
Yes, I already checked and wrote in the Q&A section, but probably this is not monitored, so I will ask here for everyone because it's important.
Yeah.
The link on the registration page both lead to the appointment for today. So there's no possibility to register for the next day for in 2 days. So you should probably send us a link at the end of the course or in a break to register for the second event.
We will do it. Thank you for
Perfect.
the questions. In the end of the webinar, I wanted to explain to all of you that for the next session we will share another link with you where you need to register it again.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Then I think to the YouTube streamers out there, you all also have the chance to work with the workshop. If you have the possibility to do it with another person or 2 other persons, it would be best, but it's also possible to do it on your own to learn about the methodology of design thinking. If you want to have the working material we are working with, so the sheets you've seen already, please go to the webpage researcheu.cu.org and then to the design thinking workshop. In the bottom of the page, you can see every PDF to download it and work with it. All right. And now we start with the first video, the introduction of the design thinking process. Have fun and listen carefully.
Welcome to this introduction to design thinking. Before I really start on what design thinking is, I want to quickly explain how design thinking relates to innovation. Innovations arise at the intersection of human desirability, economic viability, and technical feasibility. Technical feasibility means whether it is actually technically possible to bring the idea to life. Economic viability focuses on the sustainability of the business model. Just because something is technically feasible, it doesn't mean that it makes sense from a business point of view. The idea could still fail because it could not generate enough profits, for example. And finally, we need human desirability, meaning there are people who actually want this new idea, that the idea solves a problem of real humans. In business and also in science, we often see that the technical feasibility is the starting point of innovation. A group of researchers invents something new, then checking whether the invention can actually be produced on a larger scale, and often the question, who should buy this product, for whom does it solve a problem, is asked relatively late in the process. This is fundamentally different in design thinking. Here we start with the human desirability. We start with a problem that people have and try to find solutions for it. Of course, we still need economic viability and technical feasibility, but they are not the starting point of the innovation process. To make this a bit clearer, I want to present an example to you. We are confronted with the problem that magnetic resonance imaging, so MRIs, in children must often be repeated or children must be sedated for treatment as they do not lie still during procedure. This has several implications. First, if an MRI doesn't work, it has to be repeated, often several weeks later, as the MRI machines often work at full capacity. This might mean a later diagnosis, which is a medical problem. It might result in less success when treating the problem, or at least later relief for the patient. Second, it causes emotional stress for families. Certainly, a repeated procedure and later treatment will cause anxiety, but also probably no parent wants to see their kids sedated or in much stress from a medical procedure. And third, sedation or repetition of a treatment causes higher costs for the health insurances. Don't put me down on these numbers, but I really read that in Germany for privately insured persons, an MRI costs between 140 and 1,835 euros, depending on which part of the body is scanned. For public insured people, it's between 125 and 375 euros. Okay, we see that this is a really complicated and complex problem with several interdependencies, a so-called wicked problem to which we cannot find a simple solution. When trying to find a solution, one possible scenario is that doctors or the health insurance companies demand faster and quieter MRI machines from the manufacturers. The manufacturer, General Electric for example, then starts a research and development project which will most likely be very lengthy and expensive. And again, I'm not from the field to be able to guess what it costs, but I read that an MRI machine is between 750,000 and 3.5 million euros. So the development of a better machine with will be a multiple thereof. But there is also an alternative scenario, and this scenario starts with a guy called Doug Dietz. Doug Dietz works as an industrial designer at General Electric Healthcare since 20 years, and he is responsible for MRI machines. Industrial designer means that he is not an engineer making the machine work technically, but that he develops a concept of the machine, the creative act of defining the form and the feature of the machine, how it looks like, where the buttons are situated, and so on. However, he had just finished a new design and the new MRI machines have been delivered to hospitals. So he visited one of the hospitals to see the machine, his baby, on the job. He looked at it and he was very pleased with his work. Then a nurse entered the room and kindly asked him to leave the room because a patient is coming and of course he cannot be present during an MRI scan. So he left the room, went in the hallway, and there was a family approaching. The child was crying and he just heard one parent saying, "Hey sweetie, don't cry. Remember, we talked about this. You have to be very brave today. It is important that you lie still this time and afterwards we will go for an ice cream." It took Doug Dietz a second until he realized that the child needed to get an MRI and that this was what caused all the stress in the kid. And yeah, the scales fell from his eyes and he realized how it all must look in the eyes of a child. And he says himself, the room itself is kind of dark and has those flickering fluorescent lights. That machine that I had designed basically looked like a brick with a hole in it. After this, for him, very shocking experience, he did some research and found out that nearly 80% of the patients in this hospital had to be sedated in order to deal with this MRI machine. And he realized that not only a medical and financial problem are lying here, but also a social one, that it means a lot of stress and anxiety and dissatisfaction for the families. So he asked himself the question, how might we create a scanner experience that children would love? To solve this problem, he wanted to try something new, and so he did a workshop at the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design at Stanford, which was a design thinking workshop. While participating, he created a small team of volunteers from General Electric who wanted to work with him on the challenge. And this group did observations in kindergartens to understand their natural behavior, finding out what makes them happy. Also, they had a lot of discussions and interviews with all types of people working with kids, such as pedagogues, pediatricians, hospital staff, and even employees of a children's museum. And from all that, he and his team had some new ideas and then created a child-friendly MRI machine. And this is the so-called General Electric Adventure Series. You can see in the picture that technically it is still the exact same machine, but they have changed its design. And here you see in the picture the so-called Coral City theme, which shows an underwater world including a submarine. And General Electric does not only provide less scary looking machines, but they are providing a whole experience with it. In the picture you can see that the whole room is decorated. Additionally, the hospitals receive supporting materials. One of them is a booklet that tells the story of the Coral City that parents can take home and read to their kids in the night or the week before this imaging. The kids might then even need to solve some riddles beforehand, and on the day when they arrive in the room, fitting music is playing and they are only allowed to jump from one water bubble to the other until finally they have to do a little trip in the yellow submarine. And yeah, for that they will then receive a reward sticker. And also General Electric provides coloring books for the kids to prepare them for the imaging and also to educate them about the whole process. Yeah, as the name Adventure Series suggests, there's a whole series of these machines with different stories, so hospitals can decide or even have several if they need it. There's a pirate island, a cozy camp, a jungle adventure, and also several machines around the topic of outer space. And you can read about it on the website of General Electric or in the product brochure that they have published. Yeah, if we think back, remembering the slide about the relationship between design thinking and innovation, we can very clearly see in this example that the design thinking process started from a real human problem and that also the solution puts people, in this case the kids, at the center. Of course, this also has to work technically and make sense economically, but specifically this example, these two conditions were no problem at all. Quite the contrary, the idea solved a wicked problem with relatively few resources and without any technical adaptation of the original MRI machine. In fact, yeah, the seemingly simple idea worked so well that it was able to reduce the sedation rate to way under 10% in the hospital. Okay, after demonstrating the power that design thinking can have, we want to look now at the approach behind it. And let's start with a quote by Tim Brown, who is the president of IDEO. He said, "Design thinking is a human-centered and collaborative approach to problem solving using a design mindset to solve complex problems." In this quote, you can rediscover a lot of the points we just spoke about. Design thinking is human-centered and it always starts with a problem. Another aspect is the collaborative aspect. You probably remember that Doug Dietz did not come up with the idea on his own, but he gathered a team of volunteers from General Electric and then spoke with a variety of different people, from pediatricians to pedagogues to employees of a children's museum. And also, I'm not just showing you this quote because it is very fitting, but also to shortly introduce IDEO to you. IDEO is a design and innovation consultancy that has designed the first Apple mouse, and that was, more importantly, also the first or one of the first to apply the concepts of design thinking on a larger scale to businesses. Design thinking is around since about the 1970s, and IDEO was founded in the 1980s by David Kelly, who was a professor in Stanford. And David Kelly also led the creation of the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design at Stanford University in 2004, which is known as the D School and which is the leading school to teach design thinking. And to finish this, we remind ourselves that design thinking looks for innovations that people want. Technical feasibility and economic viability are important, but not the starting point. So, what exactly is design thinking? Design thinking is based on three principles: people, place, and process, that I will go through one by one in a moment. But before, I want to point out that what I present you here is based on how design thinking is taught at the School of Design Thinking at the Hasso-Plattner Institute at the University in Potsdam. The core of design thinking, the mindset behind it, is always the same, but sometimes the wording or the amount of phases of the process are different. So that's why I'm just pointing this out. The first principle is people. Design thinking works best if a team of people from different disciplines is working together. When engineers work together with people with a background in the humanities, in business, in life science, and so on. And one concept often used here is a so-called T-shape. What is meant by T-shape? A T-shaped person is an expert in at least one field who has deep discipline expertise in this field through his or her academic studies or through his or her work experiences. But T-shaped people also have many interests and competencies that are not related to their core competencies, to their academic knowledge. Other activities they are doing outside work or side jobs they are doing. And it is exactly this cross-discipline expertise that makes it possible for people of different disciplines with different deep discipline expertise to communicate, to work together. It is a connecting link between the diverse team members. And that is just not the case with every person. There are different shapes, starting with the I, so only having deep discipline expertise, to the T shape we just spoke about. But there are also pi shapes, so people with 2 core competencies, or even M shapes with 3 core competencies. When you apply to the already mentioned D School of the Hasso-Plattner Institute in Potsdam to study design thinking, which takes either half a year or a full year, depending on you, whether you only do the basic track or the second track as well. There you also apply with your T shape. So you fill in such a template for yourself. The second design thinking principle is place. Design thinking requires a variable space, meaning a free and flexible working environment. This includes furniture that can be moved flexibly, sufficient space for whiteboards and presentation areas, and materials for prototyping ideas. The space should be spontaneously adaptable to the needs of the project so that it can cater for any type of idea and any type of team need. Here's some examples of variable spaces from Kiel. You can see that they usually have a stage to present ideas or give workshops, work desks that can be rearranged, maybe walls that can be drawn and written on. And if the teams are lucky, you can even find sofas or table football for creative breaks. And this leads us to the final principle of design thinking, that is the iterative process. At the Hasso-Plattner Institute's D School in Potsdam, the design thinking process consists of 6 phases. First is understand, where the team tries to obtain as much information about the problem as possible by talking to experts, reading articles, and so on. Then in the next step, the team observes. They are trying to build empathy with the people who are affected by the problem. Next, the team is creating a common knowledge base. They are sharing what they have done in the last 2 phases, and then they are defining the point of view. This means they are pinning down the problem, this big problem that they are facing, to a bit smaller, more specific problem. Then the team is ideating, meaning they are producing ideas how the problem could be solved. For the most promising ideas, the team creates prototypes, which they then test on the target group. So the people who are affected by the problem that they have already observed in phase 2. Here it becomes clear whether the idea that the team came up with is actually solving the problem and is accepted by the target group. If not, the team has to jump back in the process. Maybe they need to choose another idea that they have come up with in phase 4, creating a new prototype and test it again. Or maybe they are even realizing that they did not fully understand the target group and they need to jump back to phase 2. Even if they received only positive feedback for the idea, they certainly have to adapt their prototype, further develop it, and test it again then. This means that the process is not linear, it is not a one-way street, but instead one is jumping back and forward in the process, making it an iterative process. And this is indicated by the lines between the phases. Also, the design thinking process can be divided into 2 spaces, the problem space and the solution space. And you can see that half of the process is reserved for the problem, meaning for a relevant period of time, the team is not at all thinking of solutions yet. And finally, a defining feature of the design thinking process is the 2 different ways of thinking it is stimulating, and that are divergent and convergent thinking. In divergent thinking, the team is creating choices. Divergent thinking is lateral thinking, non-linear, irrational, non-logical, multidirectional, and revolutionary. The team starts the process with this type of thinking, trying to open up the problem space as widely as possible. Then a period of convergent thinking follows, where decisions are made. This type of thinking is analytical, linear, rational, logical, critical, and rule-based. After opening up the problem space as widely as possible, the team afterwards defines a more specific point of view. And then again, when entering the solution space, the team first creates choices by thinking of as many possible solutions as they can. But of course, when it comes to deciding which of the solutions they want to prototype and test and finally choose to put in place, they are using convergent thinking. It is a rational and analytical decision.
All right, that was the introduction, and I hope it was interesting for you. And firstly, we start with 2 working sheets in one session right now. And that's before we start with phase 1. To phase 1, we have a short video as well. But right now, we want to get to know you, and have to know about your teammates. So firstly, the first thing is you have to do fill out a T-shape. So we will read it together. Create your own T-shape profile. He or she is an expert in one field, but has also many interests and competencies that are not related to their academic knowledge, like Katharina Knapp mentioned before. So please fill in the information on your academic studies, research, and in-depth work experience on the vertical line. And on the horizontal line, enter activities or competencies that characterize you. The introduction or the explanation of the working sheets always is on the working sheets itself in concept board. So that is the first one, and you have 4 minutes for that. After that, I will tell you in the breakout room when the 4 minutes are over. You go to the next working sheet. It's a triangle of similarities. But firstly, I want to give you a short idea of how it can look like. So maybe you thought it's only possible to have one point for the horizontal and for the vertical line. I'm a friend of collecting things that are very, very important. So you don't have to draw a pie shape or M shape. You just put more describing facts to you. So for me, it's like I'm an electrical engineer. My startup is about radar technologies, so I have in-depth knowledge about it. And I build up a company and I work as a startup advisor. So entrepreneurship is a big topic or a big field of expectation for me. And on the horizontal line, for me, it's like communication skills, connecting people, and youth support, because I'm driving with kids around 7 to 16, 2 weeks with 150 of them to a youth camp, and it's a lot of fun. So that is another one that characterizes me. The next working sheet is the triangle of similarities. So each of you go in one corner of the triangle of similarities, and we can read it together. Each participant chooses one corner of the triangle. Now the participants look for similarities. These are either written in the middle of all people share them, or on one side of the triangle, if they are commonalities between 2 people. So here, if every 3 persons have it in common, on the lines, if 2 persons of you have it in common, and on the corner itself, if it's a competency or something like that, that only 1 person had. If you are only 2 persons in a group, just use a line and not the triangle. Just place on one corner and then use it as well. Firstly, when the 4 minutes are over, you explain each 1 minute to the team member your own T-shape. So everybody knows each other. And after that, you go to the triangle of similarities and fill out it. So, but firstly, don't use concept board right now. listen carefully, and after that, I will introduce the problem we are facing with in today's workshop. And please, if you have questions, raise your hand.
A very fitting quote when starting with design thinking is this by Albert Einstein. If I have an hour to solve a problem, I spend 55 minutes on the problem and 5 minutes on the solution. This is maybe not as extreme in design thinking, but if you remember the 6 phases of the process, the first 3 phases were called the problem space. So a considerable part of design thinking is just working with a problem, not even trying to find solutions yet. And that is what we are also doing in the very first phase of the process, the understand phase. Again, when thinking back at the whole design thinking process, we are now in a phase which is characterized by divergent thinking. This means we are trying to open up the problem space as widely as possible, finding out as much about the problem as possible. So we want to understand the problem, the market, the users, existing solutions, the technology, the boundary conditions, the restrictions, the interdependencies, the actors, and everything else which has to do with the problem. What are we doing in the phase? Much of the time spent is desk research, meaning we are reading books, papers, articles on the internet, watching documentaries, and so on. But we are also interviewing experts from the field, and of course, we are documenting and visualizing results. Again, the aim is to gain as much background knowledge as possible. So, what are typical questions one could ask here? First, we can ask several what questions. What is the problem? What would we like to know? What are assumptions that need to be questioned? Also, we should find out who is involved, who is affected, who decides. Other important questions are: why is a problem important? Why does it occur? Why has it not been solved yet? We can also ask where questions, like where is a problem taking place? Where has it been solved before? Where have been similar situations? When has the problem started? When do you want to see results? And finally, the hows. How are the cause-effect relationships? How could this problem represent an opportunity? And how has it already been tried to be solved? Of course, there are also many other questions one could ask, and not all of these presented questions, will fit every problem we are trying to understand with design thinking. However, they are offering a good first step into the process.
All right. Now we come to the problem. And it's a problem, I think maybe you got in touch with your friends, maybe for yourself. It's a big topic, and the problem in a small matter is high quit rate and rising mental illness among PhD students. So I brought to you an abstract of a paper. Its title is Work Organization and Mental Health Problems in PhD Students. So that is a very big problem the world is facing with in many countries. Is it a problem? So I think it's good to have that over here. I think the study was taking place in Belgium or something like that. I don't know. We read it together. And then this is a problem we are facing the whole workshop today, and also the next 3 phases of the second part of the workshop. So research policy observers are increasingly concerned about the potential impact of current academic working conditions on mental health, particularly in PhD students. The aim of the current study is threefold. First, we assess the prevalence of mental health problems in a representative sample of PhD students in Flanders, Belgium. Second, we compare PhD students to 3 other samples: highly educated in the general population, highly educated employees, and higher education students. Third, we assess those organizational factors relating to the role of PhD students that predict mental health status. Results based on 12 mental health symptoms showed that 32% of PhD students are at risk of having or developing a common psychiatric disorder, especially depression. This estimate was significantly higher than those obtained in the comparison groups. Organizational policies were significantly associated with the prevalence of mental health problems, especially working families, interface, job demands and job control, the supervisor's leadership style, team decision-making culture, and perception of a career outside academia are linked to mental health problems. So that is normally, we have way more time for the design thinking process. So it's the shortest one is like 2 days to get best results. Normally we can do it over weeks because you have to observe, you have to talk with people who has problems and stuff like that. That is not possible right now. So please don't get too deep into the working sheets. Make sure you have written down some questions. They are in your mind when you're thinking about the problem, and fill out the working sheet, the next one, with your team. I placed this slide also in concept board so you can read it and have the problem in mind while you're working on. So the next working sheet is to phase 1, understand. You get 15 minutes to work on it. Please make sure you describe or generate as much question or answer as much questions as there are. So what is the problem? Describe it. What we like to know, just think about it. And what are assumptions that needed to be questioned? So you see, you can use these questions to get a better idea of the problem and get a deep dive into the problem. Okay, and next I will separate you again in the breakout session. I hope it. After that, we are building up a persona of the problem. All right, let's go.
In the second phase of the design thinking process, the observe phase, we are observing the behavior of real people in real situations in relation to the problem. Meaning, we are still staying in the so-called problem space. But instead of rationally understanding the problem, we are now aiming at developing empathy with a target group. I said in the beginning that design thinking is a human-centered approach, and that is what we are starting with now. We need to understand the people for whom we are designing, as the problems we are trying to solve with design thinking are rarely our own. To empathize with a target group, we can do 3 things. We can observe, meaning we can observe the users and their behavior in the context of their lives. Second, we can engage with the people, meaning we are interacting with the users and interview them. And the highest form of empathizing is to immerse, meaning we are trying to experience what our users experience. Of course, we then also have to reflect on what has been learned. It has to be documented and visualized. If we think back at the MRI example, Doug Dietz and his team watched how the kids were reacting to the MRI machines, what made them afraid, but also they went to kindergartens and observed what kids are doing when they're happy, how they like to occupy themselves. When observing the problem, when empathizing with a target group, it is important to keep in mind that we are still in the problem space and not in the solution space yet. Therefore, we have to listen to the underlying needs of people. So, what is a need? When being on a beautiful but very sunny and hot island, I want shade is not the underlying need. The underlying need is to protect myself against the sun. Shade is only one solution to this problem. Other solutions are sun lotion, putting on a hat, dive in the water, or just go inside. When being in the observe phase, it is important to keep in mind that we are still in the problem space and not trying to find solutions yet, but instead feeling what the users are feeling when confronted with a problem. Is the problem that they are afraid of a sunburn or of a sunstroke? Is it just being too hot? What is the essence of the underlying problem? And to find this out, we do 3 things that we have described before. We are observing, we are interacting with the target group, and in best case, we are traveling to the island ourselves and self-experiencing the problem. One method to document and visualize the results of the empathizing with the target group is a so-called persona. Personas symbolically embody the characteristics of the target group. They are the archetype of a user and fictional characters which are created based upon the previous research. Personas are a qualitative method to work with the research results. Of course, you could also record the information in tables and write X persons of the target group are male, that Y people are working in accounting, and so on. But it's much more difficult to build empathy with a table and then think about a solution for this target group than if you have a real person in front of you. Therefore, the goal of this phase is to imagine yourself in the shoes of the target group, to see the world through the eyes of the target group. On the slide, you can see a template for persona. Typical categories are name, age, different personality characteristics such as extroversion or cooperativeness. Also, we write down information about biography, the needs, desires, and motivations, as well as their problems and frustrations. The categories are interchangeable, meaning you can also define other categories that are relevant for your own problem. And you can imagine that it is especially categories like needs, desires, and motivations that are the defining points of a person. Yes, and it's precisely these categories that I use to describe the persona that make up the persona in the end. If you look at these 2 identical profiles, born 1948, grew up in England, married twice, has children, successful and rich, goes on vacation in the Alps, likes dogs. From the profiles, it looks as if they are very similar people, but in fact they are 2 very different people. Therefore, it is important not to take standard personas, but try to gain deeper insights. And the categories used for the presentation and collection of the personas play a major role in this. Here's an example of what categories there can be when we are in the classic business-to-customer market, meaning that we are catering for real, natural people. This is not a concluding list, but merely suggestions. We have demographic characteristics such as age, gender, marital status, place of residence, language. We can look at socio-economic characteristics such as educational level, occupational income. Also, there are psychological characteristics such as activities, motivation, opinions, wishes, values, and lifestyle. And additionally, there are purchasing behaviors with price sensitivity, purchase frequency, brand loyalty, time of purchase, and point of sale. Some of these categories are not important for some problems, others are only clear or relevant at a later design thinking phase. For example, in relation to buying behavior, the point of purchase or buying frequency. This is only clear when you actually know what you offer, but still it belongs to this phase, just to a later iteration in the design thinking process. This slide refers to the B2B sector, that is, if you want to reach not natural persons with your own offer, but other companies or also non-profit organizations or schools and so on. Then you can still work with personas. You can create the ideal typical school, company, or whatever it is. And this is where these categories come in handy. We can look at organizational features, such as where the headquarters are located, which industry the company is operating in, the company phase, and the number of employees. Also, we have economic characteristics such as turnover, profit, growth, and purchasing power. Then the purchasing behavior with purchase frequency, price sensitivity, time of purchase, and point of sale. And also organizations can have psychological characteristics. The very same company with the same amount of employees producing the same products and being located in the same area can still be very different customers because of different company vision and corporate values. Maybe the company values mental health of their employees very highly or puts an emphasis on employee development. It is more likely that they will want to find solutions to further educate their employees than the same company which just values quick profits. At the same time, one should always keep in mind that also in organizations there are real people employed. So in the end, again, we are trying to solve problems for real people. And also, there is always a decision maker, the person who decides whether the organization buys our offer or not. And this is a natural person again, with specific wishes and fears that we can create a persona, just like in the B2C example, the business to customer sector, again. The concept of persona might sound a bit funny or playful to you, but in fact, many big companies are now working with it. One German company that uses it is Deutsche Bahn, our national railway service. Here in the picture are 7 personas that Deutsche Bahn created from user surveys and observations. I have picked out 5 and introduced the short description underneath the picture. We have Elvira Brandner, a 73-year-old pensioner who regularly uses local transport around her home as a silver traveler. Then there is Holger Pfandenburg, who is a business traveler who travels a lot to customers and wants to work undisturbed on the train. Mele Gildrim is a student and as a budget traveler attaches great importance to low-cost mobility. Felix Rittberg and Anna May are modern urban travelers who use public transport as well as rental bikes and car sharing. Andreas and Rabea Brinkhoff-Müller are family travelers who travel with up to 3 children. In addition, there are 4 variants of these personas. For example, there is a Holger Pfandenburg in a wheelchair. These personas are all stored in the central system of Deutsche Bahn, and if something new is developed or an advertisement is placed, then this is done with the personas in mind. Is the new feature a problem for a person in a wheelchair? Will the new booking option also work for our silver traveler Elvira Brandner, and so on? To finish up this phase, I want to show you this very appropriate quote. I don't know a sure path to success, but I do know a sure path to failure, trying to please everyone. And this is also a goal of phase 2, to identify the most relevant groups and then, in the second step, to adapt your offer to them as best as possible. Maybe other groups will be interested and use it, but first of all, you have to take a close look at who the target group actually is and what they want. And another important point, if you actually have several target groups you want to directly address, then you have, of course, to create a persona for each one of these groups and not mix them up in one persona.
All right, so that was phase 1. And now we are doing the persona. So Katharina tell you about how to fill out a persona, and it's not like combine everything. It's like talk about what is maybe someone you know or have in mind or something like that, or you want to create a person that have this problem. There is mentioned that it's 12 minutes. I will cut it down to 10 minutes because we have not much time and we need some more minutes as well over 12 p.m. But I think it's not a problem and we will go through the next working sheets. So if there are any questions, just raise your hand. Otherwise, you have 10 minutes in the breakouts of the design thinking process. All right.
The next phase of the design thinking process is called point of view. This phase is still part of the problem space, but instead of divergent thinking, like in the beginning of the problem space, where we try to open up this space as much as possible, we are now in a phase of convergent thinking. Concretely, this means that we are first updating all members of our interdisciplinary design thinking team about what we have found out, so we are establishing a common knowledge base. You can imagine that Doug Dietz and his team did not do all the research of phase 1 and 2 as the whole group together within 1 week, but that they all had their little own tasks that they did maybe over the course of a month in addition to their normal work. And from this common knowledge base, we are concretizing the problem to one specific question, to one narrower problem that we want to solve in the solution space of the design thinking process. One way of defining the point of view is a so-called "how might we" question. Here are some examples of "how might we" questions. One you already know: Doug Dietz asked himself, how might we create a scanner experience that children would love? As I said, organizations of all kinds can use design thinking. You will know the Grameen Bank of Muhammad Yunus, who might have asked himself the question, how might we provide access to financial resources for the poorest in Bangladesh? Here an example of a project I worked on before. The German Mining Museum wanted to find answers to the question, how might we make the German Mining Museum more attractive for families? There, the employees developed several ideas, such as virtual reality glasses with a little miner that explained the museum to kids, or another idea was an underground escape room. Possible questions in the university context could be, how might we reduce the high dropout rates and psychological stress of doctoral students? Or, how might we facilitate interdisciplinary research at universities for doctoral students? The hardest part of formulating a how might we question is how broad or how narrow the question should be. If we look at the problem, the recycling of plastic waste in private households in Germany is not working, we can formulate a lot of different questions. One could be, how might we make sure that everyone gets a recycling bin? Another one could be, how might we solve the plastic waste problem? And again, another one could be, how might we facilitate the recycling of plastic waste for private households? Without knowing much about this challenge, I would say that the first one is too narrow, the second one too broad, and the third one might be good. However, this really depends on the results of the first two phases. If we already found out that the only problem is that people do not have a bin, then the first question is of course okay. One can formulate how might we questions in different ways. Two possibilities are shown here. How could we help the user, client, affected person to achieve a specific goal? And how could we redesign the context, so the what, for whom, meaning which actor, so that which need is satisfied? In order to find a good how might we question, the following approach is useful. First, every team member is thinking individually of all possible how might we questions he or she can think of and writes them separately on sticky notes. Then, every group member is presenting the sticky notes with the how might we questions, and the group decides together if the questions are too broad, too narrow, or perfect. If a question is too broad, it might help to ask how to narrow it down. And if the question is too narrow, it might help to ask why to broaden it up again. In the end, the group reads through all the perfect question and decides with which question they want to enter the solution space of the design thinking process. You will see that this, the third phase, is very important because you will work with this question during the remaining phases of the process.
So, firstly, Katharina Knapp also introduced the working sheet. Firstly, you have around 2 minutes to create questions on your own. Don't talk too much to the others, so think of yourself. And after that, we reduce the 10 minutes to 8 minutes. So you can discuss if the how might we question you created for your own are too broad or too narrow to solve a problem within this problem space. You don't need to find a how might we question to solve the whole problem, like Katharina said. You can have a small specific problem in this problem field and solve this as a first approach. That can also be the right way, or is the right way in this case. So, are there any questions? Then, and keep in mind, it's very important what kind of how might we question you have at the end. So it's one how might we question. So the third point, choose a question. And that will be the how might we question with which we will enter the solution space in 2 days. All right, then have fun in the last working session, and it starts now. Then thank you very much for participating. And now we are done or finished with the problem space. The next workshop will deal with the solution space. And I want to show you one group. I hope it's okay, because it's I think these are very good questions. And they chose 2, so they have to decide for the next session how might we question they are working with. But I think both are very good. So I want to tell you, how might we change the PhD positions or system at the university to make mental illness less likely? I think it's a very interesting approach, and it's a very good question for the solution space, as well as the next how might we question. How might we notice mental illness among PhD students earlier? So before quitting, it is too late. I think these are very good how might we questions in this case. And I'm happy that you had so many good ideas to work with this problem. And now Maria will tell you something about the next webinar and certificates.
Yes, thank you, Leve. So I would like to thank to all of you for participation, for being so active, to Leve, of course, for this very interesting webinar. Also, very important information that we will share with you link for the next spin-off Competence Lab meeting, which will take place on 6th of July at 11 a.m. We will send you by email. Also, you can find it in the chat. We have already shared with you the link. You need to register one more time. Also, what is important about the certificate, we will provide you with participation certificates like during 1 month, because several people are on vacation. So from my part, I think that's it, and see you in the next session on 6th of July. Thank you so much to everyone. Leve, you would like to tell, we don't hear you.
Sorry, I was muted. So I will let you go with a quote of Steve Blank, and it's short, but very important. There are no facts inside your building, so get outside and learn the word. I hope you had fun, and if you have any feedback, just let me know, tell me, or write an email. And I'm very happy to see you in 2 days for the solution space. Thank you very much.
So bye-bye to everyone. We can finish.
Bye.
Bye.
See you
Bye.
next day.
See you.